was living at the time, it was infested with rats and mice. At night, I would sleep with my hand draped over the bed, and the mice would scurry by my fingers. And I would wake up, and it was the most frightening thing. That loft, which is a stone's throw from here, is where I got the idea for Gremlins.
What is it? It's your new pet.
This idea came into my head and I started writing it on spec. Never really thought much about what would happen with it. It was just an idea that sort of poured out and I had to put it on paper. And then it was sent out to, I think, about 50, 60 production companies. Everyone passed. Thankfully, Steven Spielberg was leaving his office on a Friday evening, and sitting on a stack of scripts on top of his assistant's desk was Gremlins. And he liked the title. I got this call, and my roommate said it's Steven Spielberg, and I said, "Yeah, right." I had no idea the script was going to Steven Spielberg. That was sort of the beginning of the ride. And Steven had given me an office 2 doors down from his, and when the Amblin offices were just beginning, so there were 5 or 6 of us. There was Kathleen Kennedy, Frank Marshall, John Williams, Robert Zemeckis, myself, and Steven. That's really all I could remember, and a couple of assistants. And I was sort of given carte blanche. I could work on ideas and just run over to Steven's office and hand him some paper and say, "What did you think of this?" Somewhere in those conversations came this idea for Goonies.
Hey, Mike found the map!
Through all these conversations, Steven came up with a story, and I had finished my writing duties on Gremlins, and I just sort of stuck around and started writing Goonies. And I would write 3 or 4 pages a day, bring them to his office. He would make corrections. It was like working at a newspaper. And eventually we had the script, and that's how that second movie came into being. It was a really collaborative effort with Steven. So that was sort of like my graduate school of filmmaking at that point. I had a film teacher who always drilled it into my head that the fastest way of becoming a filmmaker is to become a writer first. So that's really why I started writing. I didn't really, even to this day, I enjoy writing, but I don't like being in a room by myself 8 hours a day doing that. I want to work with people, and really I had this desire to become a director.
Chris!
Brenda, what's wrong?
Oh, Chris, I'm in trouble.
Brenda, you're always in trouble.
No, I'm really in trouble. I did it.
You spiked your tab with Drano?
No, I ran away from home.
You what?
2 producers, Linda Obst and Deborah Hill, who really believed in me at the beginning. A lot of people said they were going to, sponsor me as a first-time director, but they never came through. But Linda and Deborah sent me the script to Adventures in Babysitting. I had a student film, but other than that, they had no idea that I could potentially direct a feature film. And they were adamant in supporting me during the course of that film. So again, I was extraordinarily nervous starting to make the film. It was my first day as a director. Obviously, you can imagine you've got 250 people asking you what to do. So I wasn't accustomed to that. So I had to make that transition very quickly. You have to get your head into a zone of a specific time frame, that you have to get this work done during this amount of time, because if you're a writer and something's not working, you walk away and it doesn't cost anything. But if you're a director and you walk away and you can't figure something out, it costs about $250,000.
I have a terrible feeling. Did you lock up?
Yeah.
Do we set the timers on the lights?
Mm-hmm. What else could we be forgetting?
Kevin!
Well, I had done Adventures in Babysitting, which was a moderate success, but it did not do incredibly well. And then my next film was a complete disaster and a bomb. So I was under the impression that the directing career was over. I really did think it's all over. I gave it my best shot. I blew it. And then John Hughes and I shared the same agent, and John asked the agent what I was up to, and he sent me 2 scripts for the weekend. One was a film called Reach the Rock, which I think has gotten made at some point, and the other was Home Alone. So we knew that when we first started to screen the film that it was working for an audience, but I had no idea that it would last this long. You never do. We had this mantra that we have to make it feel sort of timeless. There's only so much you can do when you're making a contemporary film, but I wanted the wardrobe not to feel too contemporary. I wanted the environment to feel not too contemporary. I don't even know if we could make Home Alone today because there's no way a kid could be disconnected from his family longer than 2 minutes. But at the same time, we try to infuse the look of the film and the feeling of the film with a sense of timelessness. Because I worry about films that are so in the moment, how they are going to stand the test of time, and if audiences 30 years from now are going to be able to relate to them. With someone like Macaulay, who had been on, I think Uncle Buck was his first film, so he was not, and then he'd only worked a couple of days. So again, you have to get him comfortable with being in front of a camera. You basically, it turns into acting lessons when you're working with kids who have never had any experience in front of the camera. And I tend to work with those kids because they're more unique and they're more fresh. So that becomes, I become less of a director, more of an acting teacher. When you're working with people who've been doing it for decades, it's you get to sit back and it's really a very subtle way of directing, getting to make a suggestion here and there, but essentially stepping back and letting them do what they do best. So it's two completely different forms of directing. And when those two things clash, which they often do when you're working with kids and professional actors, you have to be able to sort of put on both hats. You can appreciate the success for about, honestly, for about 10 or 15 minutes. And then it sort of disappears, and you have to worry about what you're going to do next.
His marriage is ending.
My marriage is not ending, it's just on hiatus.
Robin particularly at that time, was this force of nature. I think at that moment in his career, because I had seen him in Good Morning Vietnam, and I knew seeing that movie that I desperately wanted to work with him someday. He would call me boss, so flattering, but I realized he called everyone boss, every director he worked with. And he would say, boss, here's how it's going to work. I will give you 2 or 3 scripted takes and then we will play. By playing, he meant we would go from 3 scripted takes to 15 to 25 unscripted takes. And it was this sort of divine inspiration for Robin. It was a spiritual experience working with him because I never knew where that inspiration came from. But by take 4 or 5, you were completely unaware what he was going to do. And he would forget what he did because he was so lost in the moment. So if he was doing take 5, he would forget what he did in take 4. And he would have to ask the script supervisor, what did I say here? And he would remember some of it, but not. So as a result of that, the other actors in the scene needed to be covered reacting to what he did in an earlier take. So that film was shot with 3, sometimes 4 cameras just to get everyone's reaction at the time when Robin is coming up with this. So the final film is really a combination of, I'd say it's about 50% scripted, what was scripted dialogue, and the other 50% is improvisation, which we ended up shooting over 1 million feet of film, almost 2 million feet of film. The makeup was so good that he was able to go out onto the streets of San Francisco as Mrs. Doubtfire. No one knew who he was. He looked like a real human being. And he would go into shops in San Francisco as Mrs. Doubtfire and test out the accent. And it was really extraordinary.
Did you ever make anything happen? Anything you couldn't explain? You're a wizard, Harry.
I'm a what?
It was a project I really wanted to do, and there was a tremendous amount of pressure. Harry Potter fandom reached this Beatlemania level, and I had to sort of forget all about that because everything that was going on in the press at the time when we started the film was who was going to play Harry Potter, who was going to play Hermione, who's going to play Ron Weasley, who was going to play Snape, who was going to play McGonagall. And it was just, you had to tune it all out. And it was over 20 years ago, and it was easier to tune out than it would be today. And I realized for the first time that if I screwed up this film, if I made a film that didn't connect with audiences and didn't work, it would be the last Harry Potter film for a while. I would have killed what I knew Warner Brothers was hoping would be a franchise, and I probably wouldn't work again. I mean, that was definitely a career killer if I screwed up. So I did have that pressure, but I had my family in London with me, so I was able to have my wife and kids around to support me, enabled me to really concentrate on the work at hand. Dan Radcliffe, I remember showing the screen test to the studio, and they were a little frustrated with me because I wouldn't back down. I really said that Dan had to be Harry Potter. He had this haunted quality. Again, he had not done a lot of films. So I had had that experience with, certainly with Macaulay Culkin, had that experience with a few other child actors I worked with. But with Dan, I just knew there was something special about him, that the camera not only responded to him, but he did have the same haunted quality that I read in the pages of the Harry Potter novels. And I wanted to bring that to the screen. So it was an amazing relief to see that that film was successful because the opening weekend of that film, realizing we were critically and commercially successful, enabled me to go into Chamber of Secrets with without a 800-pound gorilla on my back, realizing, okay, now I can have a little more artistic freedom and have a little more fun making the film.
Would you care to join us to discuss things further?
Who is us?
I'm sorry, how rude of me. We're the Thursday Murder Club.
For me, it was very much like Hogwarts. And Hogwarts was this wish fulfillment for kids. I wanted every kid to feel when they saw the Harry Potter film that they wanted to get an invitation to come to Hogwarts School of Wizardry and Witchcraft. And I felt the same way about Cooper's Chase in the film, which is the retirement community. Retirement communities, in my experience, can be quite dreary, kind of sad places. And this one, I wanted people to see the film, even if you were in your 40s or 50s, and say, when I get a little older, I'd love to spend my final 10, 15, 20 years at a place like Cooper's Chase. So that was the goal. It has to be emotionally moving. For me, the Thursday Murder Club, the reason I wanted to do the Thursday Murder Club was not because I had any great deep desire to do a murder mystery. It was because Richard Osman had written these very, very funny, complex, original characters. And there was a very deep sense of emotion in that book. And I wanted to convey that. To me, the murder mystery was almost secondary. It was about these people.
We're all suspects.
Bugger.
Bugger.
Bugger.